Claire, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to be with us. I know you are very busy, so yeah, would you like to sort of introduce yourself and then we can crack on with the presentation? We have up until 1 o'clock just to give you everyone sort of some context. And you know, as you said, we'll ask the questions at the end. But no, Claire, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Clare Nash. I run Clare Nash Architecture, which has been going since 2011. And there's 6 of us now, and we all work from home, meet up once a week, have a big meeting in Oxford. And yeah, and so we mostly do barn conversions and eco homes based on vernacular design. And so I'm going to take you through some of those things, some of the case studies that I looked at in my book, and then how we've applied them to the homes that we're working on now. It's a bit of a mishmash of different bits, so I'm expecting lots of questions at the end. Oh, there we go. And so it's about learning from what's worked in the past and how we can use it to make low energy homes today, and that could be reuse or new build. I mean, the majority of our work is reuse because it's barn conversions, obviously, but we also do some new build low energy homes. And we don't want copies of the past, but I'm going to talk a bit about what does that mean. And oh yeah, I really would like some feedback, because I'm also going to be doing a version of this talk for an international vernacular conference, and they've asked me to do a revision of this book. And I want to make it relevant this next time round. So yeah, feedback, please. So why is it important? Well, I think it's really important. Maybe other people don't. I think it's fascinating because it tells us so much about why humans build, how they build, why they chose to build like that, what it is about the local climate that means that led them to build like that. And this is all before tech, before regulations, before architects decided how to build things, or house builders, or whatever. I think there's a lot of humanity in it, which sometimes gets a bit lost in the sea of regulation and mass housing and, you know, other modern stuff. But is it just nostalgia? And whoa, sorry. And does that really matter, or are we being snobby? And what's the difference between cultural importance, heritage, and nostalgia? I think sometimes the lines are quite blurred. And when does it become pastiche, which is basically just a copy? So this is where I think nostalgia's gone wrong. I would think most people would agree that, you know, this is, so some of it is planning regulation. I mean, because design is so subjective, I think it is quite difficult to put it into a set of policies. But then the problem with having policies is that the house builders just follow the rule book. It ticks boxes, and then you end up with this kind of thing, which is an oversized cottage. So it just looks wrong. And then because it's cheap, they use the monocolor bright red, which is upsetting to see in the landscape. It just kind of jumps out at you as not really fitting in. So this anger at this red brick box that is just seen everywhere, whereas you used to see huge variation in housing across the UK, just like our regional accents. Now it's just the red brick box on the edge of every town and city, which is disappointing. So this is a project that we did, which the client wanted a new build barn style house. So from the front, which is where you see the gate on the left, we've tried to make it look just like it was a barn that's being converted, and then from the back it's quite contemporary. But is this what I'm pondering, what everybody thinks?
Sorry, Claire, can I just interrupt for 2 secs? Yeah. I'm not sure whether people are seeing your screen.
Oh no.
I can, which is weird, and I'm assuming everyone else can. Can some yeah, it looks like Chris, can you just everything's good, right? Fine. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what was going on there, but people were saying they can't see it. They can now. Brilliant.
Oh,
sorry, Claire, I won't interrupt again now.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, so
might be worth going back 1 slide just to the red brick.
Okay. The red brick one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what I think is nostalgia gone wrong. What, you know, the red brick box everywhere. I think people heard what I said, didn't they? They just didn't
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
picture. Yeah. So and then this is one of ours. I did this in 2014. Client wanted a new build barn style house, replacing a really knackered old bungalow. And so that, yeah, that was his brief. So, but it's quite contemporary on the back because we wanted to add in chimney stacks with the roof lights and also lots of light. It's really thick walls. He wanted to go as far with passive house as he could afford. So that's the widest cavity I've ever done, and which I must admit I've gone back now. I prefer a slimmer cavity, like up to 175, because then you can use the standard wall ties. I mean, this had 8 grand's worth of Teplo ties, which the client said, we love you and everything, and we want to do this whole low energy build, but 8 grand on wall ties, which I have to admit, they've got a point. And that was in 2014, so I don't know what it would be now. So I prefer to do it in other ways now. Yeah. So is this like pastiche, or is it how we live now? And what's wrong with wanting something that looks like a barn? Personally, I think they make really good homes because they meet our needs. For now, they're not an oversized cottage. They're already big. So works quite well. And I interviewed German architect when I was doing my book. And this is how he designs. He started off as a carpenter and then retrained as an architect later. I just thought it was an interesting thing that he said. He does passive house, low energy homes. He literally does everything. So it's all timber frame. Him and his apprentices build it, fit the MVHR, the whole thing. It's a one-stop shop. It's very aspirational. Oh, that's my house again. Right. So that, yeah. So then it's looking at what's important about heritage assets. So this is a barn conversion we did. It's really unusual, curved barn. I've never worked on a curved barn before. I don't really know why they built it like that, apart from it follows the road. Yeah, so we had lots of restrictions, but there's so much interest on the inside and the outside for the people that live in it, and we wouldn't have designed it like this from the outset. This is what is fun about working with existing buildings, but I also think we can learn quite a lot from what it is that we like about them so much, what it says about us, and how we can put that into new buildings as well, so they retain that soul. So this is kind of beautiful random window design that you find on a standard agricultural barn. But how to recreate this when you're doing that not from a purely functional point of view. So I think that's kind of the way of doing it, is if you start from function and then you can kind of tweak the aesthetic, which is what they used to do. Yeah, and I think they make really lovely homes. And now that we don't work the land anymore, we don't want small windows because it's not about keeping the cold out. It's about letting maximum light in so that we don't all get depressed in the winter. We spend most of our time indoors now. We don't spend it outside. So the typical cottage that you see in the vernacular, you know, in Scotland, the Black House, for example, or the Dartmoor Longhouse, or everywhere you see the same kind of thing where they faced it south for maximum solar gain, but they've got small windows because they don't want drafts and cold to get in. And it's heated by a fire, which is very warm, but now we have airtight homes. So putting in drafts to make an open firework doesn't make sense, but you can put in infrared panels, which is the same kind of heat, which heats bodies and things rather than just the air. So, you know, fire, sun, and infrared panels, same kind of heat. So this is kind of the modern, I'm quite interested in the modern ways of doing the same old methods. Yeah, so nostalgia is obviously very attractive for holiday lets, make quite cool places to stay. Oh yes, people often ask me if I will ever run out of barns. I don't know why I put that slide in there. So I'm going to start with looking at vernacular buildings around the world, because I think it's easier to see when it's not your own climate, the benefits. and it's quite fun as well. So this is in Papua New Guinea. This is the typical vernacular house, which has how the Papua New Guineans live is all outside. They only use buildings for storage and for sleeping. And so it doesn't need light, which is advantageous because you can just block out solar gain. Has a very steep sloping roof because it rains a lot. It's very renewable, very easy to build yourself. Lots of cross ventilation. So when you go in one of those, it's lovely and cool, even though it's absolutely belting hot outside. So I went to look at the mining relocation housing because there are lots of gold mines on Papua New Guinea, and they needed to relocate people in a appropriate way, giving them something that's aspirational that they actually want to live in, rather than just you have to move, you have to be plonked here kind of thing. So they worked with some architects who were called Asai Consult, who tried to take all the best bits from the vernacular and turn it into a new building, which mostly worked. It had the aspirational thing. They all wanted to move in one of these. And the other issue was that when the mine goes, there would be no power. So they couldn't just give them aircon. They all wanted aircon, but they couldn't give it to them because they knew the generators would all go with the mine. So it had to be completely self-sufficient. But some things just weren't feasible on a mass scale. So the sago leaf roof just doesn't make sense because it's expensive to build it, and then the maintenance costs ongoing. So they went for this Zinc-Loom roof, which is very tough. But the issue with that, and I will go on to it later in another case study, is that they all want the tin roofs. It's very aspirational for some reason. But obviously it just goes straight onto your head. It's really hot. So how to mitigate that? So they did it using an apex roof. But I think they should have gone for the full double roof that you see in Australia, which I'm coming on to. But the other advantage is that they had additional mosquito proofing, and you can't do rainwater collection off the sago leaf roof, so they can now. And it's community built. They can still literally build it themselves. There's like a guy, the head of the clan, organises it all, much like a site contractor would do here, but he's, just bossing his mates around really, which is quite fun to see. So they wanted to leave them with the independence to do that. Yeah, so applying that to the UK, there's a real advantage of building as a community. You get to know your neighbours from the very beginning. You build with them, you learn all their quirks, they become friends with you. And like at Ashley Vale, which is the far right self-build, they even had like in Europe, it's really common to have, we're obsessed with opaque glazing facing, on bathroom windows and facing the side where other buildings are. Like planners say you have to have it. On the continent, nobody has that. They have massive, great big windows looking right into each other's houses, and nobody cares. And it was a bit like that at Ashley Vale. They had the same kind of thing, and they just said it's because we've all built together, we just have a kind of courtesy. We don't stare, we just look away and know. Yeah, so it's a completely different attitude, and I quite like it. Yeah, so then there's the kind of tech stuff. There's the community stuff, but then there's the tech stuff. Steep roofs obviously make loads of sense for the UK. Like you can have a pinprick hole in a flat roof and you'll get a leak, but you can have a whole tile missing and the vast majority will just flood past. So on a pitched roof, that is, which is really beneficial. You can collect lots of water. I think we should be thinking more about cross ventilation. Yeah, and deep roofs. So my take on that is I don't think we need the double roof here. Sorry, I haven't actually explained what that is, but I will. I don't think we need the double roof here in the set because it doesn't get as hot, but we do need a nice thick roof with lots of decrement delay and thermal mass. Right. yeah, so this is the house I keep going on about with the double roof. And he got the idea from, this is Lindsay Johnston. He's an architect in, he's Irish architect, but he lives in Australia. He's really good friends with Glenn Murcutt, who you might have heard of. He's won lots of awards. He's amazing. He's my favorite architect. So his idea came from, he was on holiday in Africa and he noticed that people park their caravans under these big tents or under trees because of the shade. And if you think about, like, I'm going to go to, this is my allotment, and there's a massive oak tree which has gradually made that greenhouse unusable. But the point is that in June, when it's in full leaf, that greenhouse is cool, despite it being full of glass. You'd think it would overheat, but it doesn't, because it's the same principle. It's got all that shade and ventilation underneath the shade that keeps it cool. Right, so back to Australia. Yeah, so he did this concept. So it's a bit like building under a barn, really. There's quite a big gap. So what I want to find out in the next book is what is the ideal distance between those roofs that makes it work so well. Yeah, and the heat, yeah, usual kind of passive solar shading and everything. This is a bit more detail about the roofs, about how he did them. So he did it first with this house, which is where he lived. He sold it now, moved on, but this is where he lived. And also all the walls are thermally, like really thick concrete block. And he said that creates the thermal mass so that when it gets really hot in summer, they just close the whole thing up and it doesn't overheat. I thought that was quite interesting. So he did the same principle. These are holiday homes in the forest near where he lives. And then this is some Glenn Murcutt bits, just in case you haven't come across him. And he does really interesting things that relate to kind of agricultural past and applying it to modern day, what people need from buildings. He's really worth looking up if you haven't seen him. That's my allotment again. Right, so then this is Austria now. And I was quite interested with what they do with shading and overhangs. So in the past, and also they have really heavy snowfall over there. So these big overhangs have a double benefit, which is it's easier to protect against the snowfall, shading in the summer, and they use it as circulation. So it's like a triple benefit. And they've applied that to the modern day. This is Housing Association, completely timber frame, 3-story, new build passive house. In fact, it was more than passive house. And then on the far right, don't know if you can see it, if my thing might be in the way, but it's the same thing, but a modern new build house for an individual. And this is Mole Architects, so they've done the same thing, but they haven't done the circulation. And this is Charlie Luxton. I just spotted this on Instagram the other day. I thought, that can go in my thing, because it's just what I wanted to talk about. He's done that with green core construction, so it's prefab, but they've obviously stone clad. Yeah, and we do bits of it. So we've got west facing overhangs that we like to make verandas out of. These are not fully realised drawings, but we're getting there with they're getting planning permission at the minute. And yeah, this is the kind of thing we do with housing. So we take inspiration from the kinds of materials that are nearby, but and pitch roofs, obviously, and we try and extend roofs to create overhangs for shade, but also it's amenity space. It means you can sit out all year round, not get wet, and also not get fried in the summer. Yeah, so applied to barn conversions, when we want to insulate, but then there's the loss of thermal mass, what do we do about that? And we don't want to lose the nice cool barn feeling that you get in summer. So this is one of our projects at the moment, which is barn conversion. This is what it looked like before. And this is what it looks like at the moment because it's midway construction. So this is the inside, so it's all stone. And then we're using diathanite, which has really helpful benefits because it's very insulative. It's also breathable. There's no loss of thermal mass. And because it homogenizes with the wall, you benefit from that. And then on the roof, wood fiber, because it adds that decrement delay, nice and thick. It's thermally massive. So we find it's better than using Celotex or similar. This is another project in Suffolk, collection of barns, all with different issues. The biggest one is a heritage asset, so we're slowly dismantling it. I should have put some construction drawings up here because it's being built right now. But yeah, so it's quite interesting because the little one on the top, that one it's in bad condition, so we're just rebuilding it like a cavity wall construction so they can live in it while they're finishing the rest of it. And then these two here, we're refurbishing, but we can be a bit more relaxed about it. This is the heritage barn. We're dismantling the whole thing like a Meccano set, and then we're putting it back together. The existing timber frame we're using as a service void with exposed timbers, because the client was very clear. She wants to live in a barn, not something like white plastered everywhere. So it will look fantastic when it's done. This is what it looks like at the minute. That's the plan. That's the inside. So the beautiful timbers that they loved about it. It has been tricky to get past planning because it's a rebuild. So we've had to be a bit vague. With help from the very useful planning officer, we've had to write it quite vaguely so that we can essentially rebuild it. Yeah, but it's got this handy, they were existing lean-tos, but the client said we'd quite like them as a veranda anyway. So, and it's useful because that's south facing. So it'll be a handy shade to the rest of the building behind. Plus they can use it as an amenity space. So quite like that. Yeah, and then prefab. This is a project we did for a new build house. That's what it looks like now. But it was quite interesting because it was put up in 3.5 weeks. The only thing I don't like about it is that it's foam insulation, which has high embodied energy, but it is done in a factory, has lots of speed, but you lose that thermal mass thing. And it's the embodied energy thing. So I would rather use green core construction, but they don't do one-off homes anymore. So I'm trying to find someone who can do that, because I do think prefab is such a no-brainer. I like masonry as well, but if you want something delivered en masse that's going to achieve efficiency targets, U values, everything, airtightness, and then you get a set of builders that all they do all day is just that. It's so efficient. You don't have to worry about weather, there aren't delays. It's very attractive. Yeah, so zipping back to community. So there's another way of building. So this was, unlike co-housing where you build together or self-build where you build together, this was actually a developer that turned a farmyard. It was a farmyard development with some new build. So this is a new build part of it that looks barn style. And the architect that worked on it, he was super keen on eco timber frame and convinced the developer to go along with him. Although, as he self-described, he was more like Jeremy Clarkson than eco developer. But the architect persuaded him, and they're doing much more of this now. But what was interesting about this was two things. One was that all of the people that moved in were completely unknown to each other before, but I arrived 6 months in to interview them all, and they all knew each other's names, the names of their cats. It was really close, and I think it's just because of these it's not just because, but part of it is they have these open-ended gardens. There's a lake further back, which entices people out. So, and also when you're in the house, the party walls are done so amazingly. I mean, this is just how it should be built, but it often isn't. The architect had to pay a lot of attention to the workmanship as it was going along to make sure the sound insulation was done well enough. But you can't hear anything. They haven't got a clue when somebody else is next door. The only time they know is when they're in the garden and they're saying over the fence, hello, kind of thing. So that's a really nice way to live, because you get to choose when you want to interact with your neighbours. You're not bothered by their noise or anything. You don't have to build detached, which means that you benefit from all the thermal gain from building in a terrace. And I just think if we did more of this, people wouldn't have an issue, and it wouldn't be such a status thing. I need detached for sound issues and status. Because the other thing about this is Cardiff, edge of Cardiff. Most people in Cardiff didn't have a clue what an eco home meant or was. Now they're really super popular. So it's also like a cultural shift that's happened, which is part of the thing that architects are always saying, that the house builders say they're building what people want, but if you don't give them an alternative, how do they know what they want? This is the alternative and they want it. I can't remember what I was going to say about that. Yeah, so I'm going to end on a bit of a story now, which is about cultural significance and aspirational vernacular, which is what I call it. So this is the Bolivian Altiplano, and in Bolivia, typically, in the past, they've built with adobe and bits of stone, but mostly adobe with thatch roofs, and they have a huge high diurnal temperature range. So it's freezing in the morning and the evenings, and then absolutely boiling in the middle of the day. And but the problem is, because of status, they want to live in these brick homes. So you can see, I don't know if I'm in the way of it, my picture, but you can see on the right, there's a, it's a bit like in the UK, you often see stone fronted houses, and then behind is some other material, because that's the less status thing. They want the brick, the stone front, because that's what you present to the world. It's exactly the same here. So they've got adobe on the sides, brick front, but you also see fully brick everywhere. And it's so inappropriate. It's like living in a garage in a desert. There's zero thermal benefit. And they were going to bed at 6 o'clock, the people that lived in these, because they were so cold. So this is some Dutch architects came across and decided this was an issue and that they thought they could solve it. And also they needed to make it aspirational. So they did this. This is kind of a show house settlement. But you can see wherever I went in Bolivia, there were little pockets of these appearing everywhere, where people had come here, learned how to build like this, and then done it for themselves. This is adobe brick, parabolic construction, and it's completely, it just deals with that diurnal temperature range really effectively. So they don't have to go to bed at 6 o'clock anymore. They can carry on doing their normal activities because they're not freezing. Doesn't cost anything to run, because that's the other issue. Energy bills going much higher now. And they also took, they bore in mind how people actually live there. I mean, it's a bit similar to Papua New Guinea, where they live outside quite a lot. So they have collections of buildings around courtyards for different functions. So there's a sleeping house, and there's a cooking house, and there's a toilet thing somewhere. Yeah, so this is much better way of life for these people, but giving them the status that they need as well. Yeah. And then this is in China, same kind of thing, except that Xi'an University saw a big problem in that people who were living in the countryside in these kind of cave dwellings, which is the original form here with the sugar paper windows, but completely thermally massive, built into the side of the hill. I don't know, yeah, like that. Yeah, so and some with the combination of that and the Kang bed, which is, so they have a little stove where they do all their cooking and everything, and then the heat from the stove goes through the bed, which they call, it's like a mother to them because it's always warm and they all sit there all the time. So the combination of that and the thermal mass means they maintain a steady 16-degree internal temperature year round. Bearing in mind this is northern China, it's freezing and also very hot. So there's instead of a high diurnal temperature range, there's a high seasonal temperature range, and the Earth is still very appropriate for that. So anyway, Xi'an University were worried about people moving to the cities and living in unsuitable modern apartment blocks and not being able to afford to heat it because they're not suitable for that climate anyway. And then you're paying a lot for the electric heating, which is expensive. So fuel poverty was a huge problem. But there's also the cultural significance about cave dwellings, which is that for some reason over there, Chairman Mao is absolutely revered, and he plotted the Cultural Revolution in a cave dwelling. And you can go there, which I did, and there are lots of Chinese tourists all taking photos themselves, pretending to be Chairman Mao. It's quite funny. I don't get it, but anyway, so there's just, this is the aspirational part of it. So people still want to live in cave dwellings because of the nostalgia and the cultural significance. So Xi'an University decided to come up with a modern version, still with the Kang bed, still made out of earth, but a bit of extra concrete support because, you know, modern earthquake regulations and earthen roofs. And they look like this on the right-hand side, and proper glass as well, not sugar windows anymore. And they're really popular. So yeah, how to sort of apply that to the UK. This is one of our buildings. I think it's, yeah. So we've used flint here and brick, and it was all local materials and everything. And it's a rebuild of a modern barn. So we had the advantage of being able to start from scratch with cavity wall and everything. But this is, I suppose this is pure nostalgia for the traditional way of building. But it's very pretty, and it was very much client-led on that front. So I don't know, I suppose I've got more questions than I have got answers. Oh yeah, I think that slide's in the wrong place. Yeah, so yeah, feedback please.
Okay, cool. I'm sure we'll be in a position to give you some feedback, most definitely. In terms of, sorry, 2 secs. There are some questions actually. Let me address those first before I start wittering on. Just going backwards. Brian's asked about, do you know how they form the barrel vaults in mud?
Yeah, yeah, in fact, they had some really nice instruction leaflets that everybody could just pick up. I'm sure I put one of them in my book, but so if you contact me, I can send you it. But it's a bit like bridge building, you know, where you get those curved bridges. You just kind of have to do it gradually. I don't know exactly how it works because I didn't do it, but it did work.
Right, okay.
And anybody can do it. Like they're all unskilled people that have built. The Dutch architects did the first lot, and they ran lots of experiments and made mistakes. And then the thing they've got now is a really good formula.
Cool. Chris is from Mitchell Evans has asked a couple of questions. Just now he's added, what do you think is the most suitable wall and roof construction for new build homes in southern England?
I think either timber frame, but probably prefab. And if you're doing it en masse, go for green core construction. But or masonry build, but quite decent sized cavity, 175, because then you don't have to pay a fortune for the Teplo ties. Because up to 175 you don't get the cold spot issue. After that you do, because you've made the wall the difference in temperature higher, so that's why you get the cold spot issue. But and then top up with renewables, have a nice thick roof with wood fibre board on top to make a nice warm roof, that kind of thing. Either of those two options. And so I always look at both, whatever we're doing, and it comes down to cost, availability of materials, and availability of the right prefab construction for that area. But green core work in the south of England, so you might.
Yeah, there were Oxfordshire. We've had Chris on, and what should we call it, Charlie Luxton as well, actually, at different times. There's got to be more people than just green core that can
There
help
are
with this,
definitely.
because otherwise, I mean, how can it be scalable? Because that was a question I was going to ask, but let's come on to. So Anna's asked a question about the significance of a wider cavity. I presume that you've just answered that question then, in terms of about the cold spots. Sorry, Richard, have you considered compressed earth blocks in place of masonry?
I've looked at all kinds of different stuff, and it's the cost thing always, because what we're doing, it's always going to be a bit more costly. So you're always trying to mitigate, you're trying to get maximum thermal gains, maximum comfort, maximum long-term usage of that building, combined with affordability. And because construction costs have just gone absolutely bonkers, yeah, it's tough. And we don't have the kind of house builder buying capacity where they can negotiate really low costs on materials, unfortunately. Yeah, so I'm always looking at it, and then it always comes down to cost, sadly.
So that's where the scalability comes into it, because like this contemporary vernacular design it's almost like it's not a movement, but obviously it's an ethos, and if it was accepted by it's not necessarily commercial, is it? It's as you. So that's the limitations which we were talking about earlier. It's sort of the privilege, have the opportunity and the choice to build like this. But how do you get it to the stages where it's the masses? So I was going to ask, so the Cardiff example, who's the developer for that? Because I love what they've done there. I love the fact that they don't have to be detached buildings, and they've thought about the party walls and the sound insulation, etc. That's marvelous. And I don't know whether you've heard of writer Green Futures out of Bristol, where they did something similar, where it was a what do you call it? Not co-living, co-building. What's the model there? Sorry, when you're talking about where a community ends up building the houses on
Community self-build.
Community self-build type thing. Yeah. So that's what they did in Bristol, and obviously everyone got to know each other, and because they weren't detached, because they were terraced, so they got all the thermal mass benefits, etc. But they were well designed. It was, but it's about the community, and I think vernacular, as you're saying, it's not just about the building itself; it's about the community, and that's where everyone sort of seems to live in great harmony. So that's interesting, what the Cardiff developers done there, because then equal at the other extreme, where someone has tried to use the vernacular, is something like Poundbury, which people get a bit sniffy about, but ultimately they've done a blooming better job than
the house builders
and Bellway and all of those guys. And Barrett and Bellway, they can do it, but as you said right at the start, they're bound by regs. They'll do what they're told, and if they're not told, then they won't do it. But they can. So Poundbury, because I mean you're talking about barns, but obviously there's all sorts of different vernaculars over the UK, whether it's longhouses down here in Devon or thatched cottages in Norfolk and Cotswolds, etc. I mean, it's like so. Yeah, it's in. I mean, it's interesting. It's just how does it get to a point where everyone lives in a better house that's designed for its area or for its place?
Yeah, it's interesting you say it can't be done on mass scale, because Barratt Homes did. There's a case study in my book. Barratt Homes did it, but it's because they had a really strong client, Joseph Rowntree Trust,
Yeah.
who insisted, when they were doing the tender stuff, that you have to do it like this or else, kind of thing. And Barratt then won the tender, made stupid profit. I've got the numbers in the book. And so they totally can do it. It's just about whether and they're always it's a competition thing. Like they say, if we're all doing the same and it's a level playing field, then we'll absolutely do it. So this is why it needs to be a top-down regs thing. And but they won't kind of pioneer new things or ways of doing things, because ultimately the shareholders aren't going to like it.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole different conversation. But in terms of well, they are trying to do things because they're doing it up in Salford, aren't they? There in the university, in terms of looking and exploring at different renewable techs, etc. I've missed a question from Brian right at the start. Brian's asked about the stained timber lintels. Are they solid? Are the stained timber lintels solid and structural? That was referring, must have been one of your first slides. Brian, did you want to come off mute? And
They wouldn't be structural, because we never put in timber lintels as structure. They're always an aesthetic thing to hide the steel behind.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Cheers.
cool. Cheers, Brian. Yeah, if anyone else has got any other questions, that's cool. So yeah, in terms of how do you, what are the key elements then of contemporary vernacular design for you? How would you?
I think it's a bit like what Alexander Ilg said, from Stegersahn in Germany, about starting from what's needed. That's what I try and do.
Yeah.
And then obviously you got to make it past planners and meet building regs and stuff. But yeah, I try and avoid any sort of fancy stuff and try and make it simple but beautiful. And I like using traditional local materials because
Mhm.
of the nostalgia thing. Just makes you feel good to look at them, but also they just totally fit in, like a stone or a timber or even a render house. Yeah, maybe not render quite so much, but it doesn't offend the eyes. Like when you walk past it, it looks like it could have come from the ground. And render is better just because it's not like so in your face with the color, like the bright red brick kind of thing. But you can, that's a man-made thing. But depending on how it's done, I mean, if it's a lime one, it looks lovely, doesn't it? On a cob building, a lovely lime render.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that kind of thing, really. And yeah, trying to avoid having too many walls, because then the form factor thing. But I don't like just doing a box. I know it's fantastic for PHPP,
Yeah.
but it's a bit boring. Yeah, so that kind of thing. I like an L-shaped house because you have all the aspects of you have multiple rooms that you can get sunlight from, which is important for mental health and everything. It's a really nice way of living, and it really lends itself to the kind of story of here's a house and here's a barn next to it kind of thing.
Mhm.
It looks good, but it's all subjective, isn't it? This is my opinion.
No, that's what it is very much, especially when you're sort of talking about pastiche and everything. It's I will come on to Chris's other question, but I've heard you talk before about sort of designing from a farm, like almost from a farmyard perspective as well? So we just touched upon it then in sort of the L shapes and everything, and it sort of how could you expand a bit on the why farmyard design ethos would works for you?
I think it's really useful tool for building on the outside of villages, because it just kind of looks right, rather than like we did. It didn't get planning permission in the end, but not because of the design, because the parish council pulled out. But it was like a combination of a row of railway cottages at the front along the road, which everybody loved, and then behind a farmyard style development with shared garages, which is this. I nicked that idea from the Wales case study, because that was part of the reason of the community development, is because you have to go to the same place to get your car every day. You're going to have incidental conversations, and then with home offices above them, the garages, to kind of maximize the space value. And it's just a nice friendly way of building, because you have this shared courtyard then where again you have incidental meeting points, but it doesn't look, it's kind of familiar, but it's new. I think that's what's nice about it.
No, I get that. I get that. Just picking up on Chris's first question, he was asking about U values. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it. Where are the U value questions? Oh, sorry, no, it's around diathanite. 2 secs. Yeah, hi Claire, thanks for a great present. What sort of U value do you get with the diathanite over an existing stone wall, and how thick are you applying it?
Yeah, so the conductivity of it is, you find this with all the breathable ones, that it's not as good as, like, obviously it's nowhere near Celotex, which is 0.02 something, 0.022, and then we often fill our cavities with ice over 32 because we love mineral wool. I don't want to think about slipping bits of Celotex in cavities, and we don't have to do fire stopping. So yeah, going back to being simple, but diathanite, you can make a huge difference just with 20 mil. So we do that on all our reveals, window reveals, especially in a retrofit situation. But it does get costly over a certain thickness. So we've done on that one, the barn conversion I was talking about, we're doing a combination of wood fibre and diathanite to get the most cost effective way of doing it. But wood fibre is also thermally massive, so it does the same thing. And then we got a woofy moisture check for that, because that's the other issue, is you're upgrading the wall, then you're increasing the likelihood of interstitial condensation, depending on which aspect that wall has, and so on.
Okay.
It's all right. It's a complex thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
There's no blanket rule of thumb.
Hi Claire, sorry. Just can I just follow up then? You mentioned wood fibre. So are you saying you use the wood fibre over the stone and then the diathanite over that?
Yeah.
Got it. So the main insulation you're adding is through the wood fibre.
No, it's fairly chunky. I think it's 60-40, so 100 mil total. So 60 wood fibre, 40 diathanite.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
But we came to that also through the woofy thing. So whatever building you do would be a subtle alteration of that, I think.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Cheers, Chris. Kingsley's picked up on feedback, so I've just, I hope you don't mind. I've just shared your email address with the guys, because that way is going to be the easiest way for people to feedback to you. I'll also post this video up on Meshwork tomorrow, and I'll say, please, to people who's viewed it, get in touch with you to help. When is the next iteration of the book or the presentation you mentioned about?
So the conference is in October in Oxford Brookes.
Yeah.
and it's called Knowing the Vernacular. But the book, who knows? I haven't started it yet.
Right, okay. Yeah, it's quite an undertaking.
Yeah, well, the last one was a big undertaking because I visited all of them and I interviewed all the residents, because I wanted proper feedback, not just data. I wanted user feedback and also from people who wouldn't have necessarily chosen to live there because they're housing association tenants or other reasons. So a completely unbiased view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when for the 25 examples, they're worldwide, aren't they? Like Papua New Guinea, as you said. So from a housing association perspective, so from a tenant's perspective, okay. And then I mean that's quite an undertaking then with a lot of travel. And that's not just 3 days that you had off last week. That's
No, well, I because I could work remotely quite a lot. So that's what I did.
yeah, fantastic.
But yeah, the Papua New Guinea stuff and China and everything, that was part of a 6 month research trip. I took a sabbatical to do that. And then all the European and British ones, I think there are 10 British ones and then 5 British co-housing ones. It's quite a significant part is the UK, but I chose to focus on the international ones on this one. But yeah, I did those while I was running my business at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite hard work, but I didn't have a son then, so
Very, very impressive. No, and then I'll put a link obviously to your book as well to coincide with the notes and the recording for tomorrow. So I think we've reached 1 o'clock now. So thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed that. Yeah, great to have you with us today. Thanks everyone else for joining and your questions. And just thinking where we are. Yeah, there's 17th July. We have another webinar next week. I'll be doing that from Tuscany. So hopefully my Zoom link will work. But yeah, I'll see everyone next week. Yeah, thanks once again, Claire. It's fantastic. Would you mind sharing the deck just if you email it over to me and then I can accompany it with the video, but marvelous. All right then, guys. Have a good afternoon. Thanks then. Cheers.